York. It's one of England's great cities, attracting millions of visitors every year with its illustrious history and architecture. You'll know it as a former Roman capital of Britannia, or perhaps the Viking capital Jorvik. It's also the birthplace of Guy Fawkes, the home of some of Britain's most complete medieval walls, ghostly apparitions, world-famous links with the Harry Potter movies, and one of Britain's strangest street names. Welcome to Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate. Said to be one of the shortest streets in Britain, what Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate lacks in length, it more than makes up for in bizarre history, legends and misconceptions. And if you've visited York, you've almost certainly walked straight past or even along Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate. The street lies just a few feet away from the famous Shambles, the atmospheric, narrow 14th century alleyway where tourists flock to, many for its associations with Diagon Alley in the Harry Potter movies, though the Shambles isn't actually where that was filmed as some people think. The exact dimensions and boundaries of Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate have become a bit warped over time, and we'll touch on that in a second. But traditionally, it's this 30-odd foot long bit of road that connects Collier Gate with the junction between Pavement, the Stone Bow and Fosse Gate, and which once upon a time was even narrower until houses lining Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate at the end of the church building were demolished around 1750. But if there's one thing that draws people to Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate more than anything, it's that bizarre name. The street sign is said to be the most photographed in the entire city. But what exactly does the name Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate mean? Well, let's get the one thing we do know for sure about the name out of the way. Like many streets in the centre of York, Fosse Gate, Castle Gate, Micklegate and Petergate, just to name a few, Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate is suffixed with the word gate, a relic of the Viking era word gata, meaning street. But what on earth does Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma mean? Well, as you'd expect for such a small and oddly named street in a city with centuries of history and numerous different rulers all speaking different languages, there are as many theories as to the origins of this name as there are stones in the city walls. So let's go through some of the most famous ones. On a plaque on the wall of the St Crux Parish Hall that you can see here, it reads that the street was known in the year 1505 as Whitnall-Whatnall Gate, said to mean, "What a street!" with an exclamation point to boot. The origins for this theory go back to the Vikings, who are said to have named Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate as a bit of a joke regarding its length, either mocking it with a name that effectively meant, "You call that a street?" or sarcastically marking it out as a street so unique it had no equal. But as you can imagine, that's not the only theory as to the name. In a post-Viking medieval York, the city's whipping post is said to have stood on the street, given its rather central position at the intersection of a number of major streets. At the time, the whipping post was a place of punishment, where local ne'er-do-wells would be tied up and made subject to a public flogging, while pub landlords are also said to have been bound to the post and whipped as a penalty if they were found to have been putting too much water in the ale they were serving the good people of York. According to this theory, the sound of a whip cracking was written down in the rather numb onomatopoeia of Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma, giving the street its name where, thankfully, no whipping takes place today. There are more theories, each more tenuous than the last, but the bizarre mystique of Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate's name is what makes it such a great place to seek out in York. That being said, while we've hopefully cleared up the confusion surrounding its name, there's the other issue of where exactly the street begins and ends. Looking at it from this angle, Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate is traditionally said to run from the street corner, where this crowd of people are, to the side of the white building that you can see in the distance. But when you look around the corner, you'll notice that there's an alleyway that runs perpendicular to Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate from the end of the Shambles, and where you'll find just one of 3 addresses bearing the name of the street, this being a games store today. Now, as far as I could tell, this alleyway connecting the Shambles with Collier Gate isn't officially a part of Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate, but in the modern day, it too is generally given the name Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate, giving this oddly named street a bizarre T-shape when looked at on maps. So that's the story of Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate, York's strangest street, though it's certainly not the only oddly named lane in the city. A few streets away in the direction of York Minster is the busy road of High Petergate, always packed with people making their way between the Cathedral Quarter and the Shambles. But when walking along High Petergate, you might miss the narrow alleyway today known as Lund's Court, but which was once upon a time named Mad Alice Lane. The story goes that the lane was once the home of a woman named Alice Smith, who was reputed to have been executed in York Castle around 1825, possibly for attacking or even poisoning her husband, or simply for being quote-unquote mad. Like Whip-Ma-Whop-Ma Gate, however, the origins of the name of Mad Alice Lane are extremely murky, more likely fiction than fact, as has been proven by the fact that records of public executions in York in the 1820s show no evidence of a woman named Alice Smith. The truth could be an entirely different story, but it may just have been lost to history. So that was the tale of some of the strangest streets in York. But there are plenty more odd place names to be found around the country, from the nearby village of Wetwang to the hamlet of Scratchy Bottom, and the narrow alleyway Pig's Head in the Pottage Pot Gant. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And do let me know if you've come across any other particularly odd place names around the country by leaving a comment down below.